Rain tapped softly against the windshield as Daniel Ross sat in his car outside Maplewood Elementary, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding him together. His tie was crooked, his shirt slightly wrinkled, and the faint smell of crayons and apple juice still clung to his sleeves. Proof that he'd rushed straight from picking up his son from after-school care. Parent night. Just another event where he'd have to smile, nod, and pretend he wasn't out of place among two-parent families with polished smiles and easy laughter. He was used to being the odd one out. The single dad who worked 2 jobs, who brought store-bought cupcakes to bake sales, who sometimes forgot picture day. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. Because the moment he stepped inside the brightly lit hall, his heart stopped. His breath hitched, his world tilted on its axis. Standing at the front of the room, addressing the teachers and parents with quiet confidence, was her, Amelia Hart, his first love. The woman he'd once planned a life with. The woman who had vanished from his world a decade ago without a goodbye. She wasn't just another parent, though. She was introduced as the new CEO of the district's Education Foundation. There to give a speech about community involvement and school improvement. She looked radiant, poised in her tailored navy suit, hair swept neatly behind her shoulders, eyes as calm and commanding as he remembered. For a moment, Daniel felt like he was 20 again. Back when dreams felt real and love didn't hurt. But that was before everything fell apart. Before his life had rewritten itself in the language of loss and resilience. Before he'd become a single dad trying to hold it all together. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes in love's power to heal. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Red Heart. Daniel tried to focus on the presentation, but his mind kept drifting back to college days when they'd studied under the same oak tree, the smell of coffee in her hair, the plans they'd made to start a nonprofit together. Back then, Amelia had been the light in his every dark corner. But after graduation, she'd received an offer abroad, one she said she couldn't refuse. He'd asked her to stay. She'd promised to come back, but she never did. He'd waited months for a letter, a call, anything. Instead, life handed him silence, then tragedy. His wife, Laura, had entered his life years later, a friend, a comfort after heartbreak. They'd built something gentle together, but fate had other plans. When their son Ethan was just 3, a drunk driver had taken Laura's life in an instant. Since then, Daniel's world had been reduced to bills, bedtime stories, and silent prayers that he wouldn't fail as a father. Now, as he stood in the same room as the woman who once held his heart, every scar inside him ached. He didn't know whether to walk away or walk up to her. He did neither. He stood still, invisible among a crowd of polished parents, watching the ghost of his past speak about building better futures. After the speech, parents mingled and introduced themselves. Daniel stayed back pretending to study the posters on the wall. But fate, as always, had its own sense of timing. He heard her voice before he saw her. That soft, unmistakable tone. Daniel. His name sounded fragile in her mouth, as though it had been buried for years. He turned. Their eyes met and the world fell silent for a heartbeat. She looked stunned as if seeing him cracked open something she thought she'd buried long ago. Wow, it's been a long time. Daniel forced a small polite smile, the kind you give to strangers, not ghosts. Yeah, a lifetime, it seems. Her gaze flickered to the small boy hiding behind his leg. Ethan peeked out shyly, clutching his father's hand. And this must be your son. Daniel nodded. Ethan, My reason for everything. Amelia's smile faltered for just a second. Something unreadable passed through her expression. He's beautiful, she said softly. He looks like you. Daniel wanted to ask why she'd left, why she'd never written, why she was suddenly here standing before him like no years had passed, but he didn't. Some wounds were too deep to open in a crowded school hallway. The following week, the school announced a new initiative, the Bright Futures program, funded by Amelia's foundation. It aimed to support single parents and struggling students. When Daniel received an email inviting him to participate as a parent volunteer, he almost declined. The thought of working with her again felt like inviting old pain to dinner. But then he saw Ethan's hopeful face when he mentioned the program. "Can we go, Dad, please?" And that was how Daniel found himself sitting in a small community hall the next evening surrounded by parents watching Amelia once again. She spoke with passion, compassion even about supporting children who'd lost parents, families facing hardship, the need for second chances. Daniel realized something then. Her eyes glistened when she talked about loss. There was pain there, too. Maybe she hadn't escaped unscathed either. Over the next few weeks, they worked together on several projects, fundraisers, book drives, mentorship programs. At first, they spoke only in polite, professional tones. But one evening, while packing up leftover school supplies, their hands brushed over the same box. The touch lingered. Amelia broke the silence first. "You probably hate me." Daniel sighed. "I did for a long time." She nodded slowly. "I deserve that." He leaned against the table. "Why'd you disappear, Amelia? You just vanished." Her eyes lowered. "My father had a stroke right after I took the job abroad. I stayed to take care of him. And when I finally came back, I heard you'd married." Daniel blinked, stunned. "You heard?" She nodded faintly. "It hurt, so I stayed away. I didn't want to interfere. I thought you were happy." Silence filled the room thick with what ifs and could have beens. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "I was for a while. But life changes." She looked at him with something soft, almost fragile. "I'm sorry for everything." He didn't reply. He just nodded and packed another box. But that night when he tucked Ethan into bed, he couldn't stop thinking about her words about how love never really disappeared. It just waited quietly until hearts were ready again. Weeks turned into months. The Bright Futures program thrived. Daniel became known as the most dedicated parent volunteer. Always the first to arrive, the last to leave. Amelia often found excuses to talk to him about upcoming events or Ethan's progress or just life. Slowly, their walls began to crumble. One evening, after a long charity gala, they found themselves alone in the parking lot. The air was cold, the stars blurred by city lights. Amelia smiled faintly. "Do you ever think about how things could have been different?" Daniel chuckled softly all the time. "But then I look at my son and I know every wrong turn led me to him. So maybe it all happened the way it had to." She looked at him for a long moment. "You've changed, Daniel." He smiled. "We both have." Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, the silence between them didn't hurt. It healed. Life moved quietly after that, but differently. Ethan adored Amelia, who began visiting occasionally, helping him with school projects or cheering him on at soccer games. The three of them formed something delicate, unspoken, but real. A bond rooted not in the past, but in the chance of something new. Then one day, Ethan fell ill. Nothing major at first, just a fever that wouldn't go away. But within days, he was in the hospital, hooked to machines, doctors whispering words like infection and complications. Daniel's world collapsed. He stayed by his son's bedside every night, sleepless, hollow, terrified. One evening, Amelia appeared at the hospital with food and a blanket. She sat beside him, silent, holding his hand when he broke down. "Don't lose hope," she whispered. "He's strong like you." For days, she stayed, refusing to leave, organizing help, making calls, even sleeping in a chair next to Daniel. And when Ethan finally opened his eyes again, weak but smiling, Daniel realized something profound. She wasn't the girl who left anymore. She was the woman who stayed. A month later, at the school's spring festival, Daniel watched Ethan run across the playground, laughter echoing like sunlight. Beside him stood Amelia, looking radiant in the golden light. She turned to him quietly. "I never thought I'd get a second chance to be part of your life." He looked at her, really looked beyond the years and the pain. "You didn't just walk back into my life, Amelia. You helped rebuild it." Tears shimmered in her eyes, "and you reminded me what love feels like." As music floated across the field, Daniel reached out and took her hand. No grand promises, no fireworks, just two people who had found their way back through life's wreckage, standing side by side, stronger than before. Because sometimes love doesn't return in the same form it left. Sometimes it comes back wiser, quieter, carrying the lessons of loss, the strength of forgiveness and the beauty of new beginnings. And as Daniel watched his son laugh under the fading light, he knew he'd finally come full circle. Not to the love he'd lost, but to the one he was meant to find again. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps bring more real emotional stories like this to life. Red heart. And before you go, comment below and tell us, do you believe people deserve a second chance at love?